All right, let's welcome you all to Photoshop here. And the first thing I want to do is to open up a new file. So let's go ahead and do that. Yours might look slightly different if you're opening it up for the first time. It might be asking you what look you want, um, but eventually you'll get to this landing page. And from here, you can open files that have been opened before, or you can create new. Or you can go to open and it'll locate, the file that you're looking for. But we're going to do a create new. You can also do it up here. Either way is fine. And there's a bunch of presets, and don't feel overwhelmed. As you get used to it, there's a bunch of different basic formats that people tend to use. So photo, these ones, what I want you to notice here are resolutions as well as the actual inch size. So typically when you're thinking about photos, those are actually printed eventually, right? And they have a physical format. And typically things with physical formats, we measure in inches. And we always want the resolution to be at least 300 if you're printing it, because if you do anything lower than that, you're going to be able to see the pixels and it just won't look like a sharp image. So there's a 7x5, 3x2. The other thing you'll see is landscape versus vertical. Landscape is horizontal. So those are just some blank ones. They do also have some templates that you're welcome to utilize. I think typically you'll probably be starting from scratch, but these are different items that you might use in the future if you end up doing a lot of design. So if you look at more presets, the verticals are here. You can see that the actual size. So portrait is vertical, landscape is horizontal. I might be using the word vertical more often, or the word horizontal more often. So just know that part. And then again, 8x10s, we're pretty used to those types of sizes. For print, there's more again, and these again are at 300 because it's assumed by that word there that you're actually going to have a printed form. And these are again pretty standard sizes. Art and illustration is probably going to be a mix. Web is going to be at 72 because that's the resolution that we use for internet primarily. Even if you use something higher, you sometimes can't really tell the difference. So those are some real normal formats that a website would be set up in. Mobile would be different, but it's also at 72. And these are just smaller again, and they're listed as, what particular phone size. Film and video, typically, again, we're talking about because it's going to be on screen, it's going to be at 72. But you can also just type in your own if you know what your goal is. It doesn't hurt to have a name first. It will not save it automatically for you in terms of the file itself, but it'll start off with a name. So let's just do whatever you want here. And then the size here is in inches to start with, but that's probably because I'm on print. Let's see if I switch it over to mobile. Yeah, it switches it over to pixels. So you can start with something and then modify it. So whatever you might want here. Orientation, we'll flip them. Resolution, it's a good thing to start with 300 if you can, especially if you don't know your final place of viewing or maybe multiple sources. If you've got both something for the web and in print and both are going to be shown, then start with the 300 and you can easily downsize after that. Background content, you can do whatever color you want, or you can actually even have transparent. So if you're working with web stuff, sometimes you're going to be working with transparent. Otherwise, let's see, I skipped one. So up here is pixels per inch or pixels per centimeter. We typically in the US work with inches for whatever reason. We don't use metrics as much. So that'll probably going to be your, what you end up choosing. Up here, there's this little box, and it's called Artboards. If you click Artboards, you're going to have, essentially, it's almost like a document with multiple pages. They're not really pages, like you can't make a book out of them, but it's like, that's the closest thing that I can come up with. They're called Artboards. They're going to be existing also in Illustrator. So the next thing you do is you figure out, now in this one, because probably where we started out here, that's interesting. It's not letting me choose a different mode. There should be a CMYK version or an RGB mode. Let me see if I switch to a different mode, there we go. So for some of them, it just doesn't allow it. And others, you can get the full range here. So we'll get a little bit more into this, but RGB stands for red, green, blue color, and this is for on-screen use. And CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and key, but some people will say for black. And these are for printed versions. So anything you guys have all printed at some point in your lives, and you know, if you print from home, you've got those little ink spots, and if you look at them, that's what those are. Commercial printing does the same thing. It's just that they're not all in one case. They're going to be in multiples. Large machines. So anyway, CMYK and RGB are the primary ones that you're going to be utilizing. I don't usually recommend doing grayscale. If you have an image that looks grayscale, you can always make it that way, but still keep it in RGB or CMYK. The reason being, these won't show up online correctly. And so basically, CMYK or RGB. CMYK has a little less vibrancy, because if you see something on screen versus something that's printed, it's going to be far more vibrant on screen. So you can always switch to RGB, but if you start at RGB and switch to CMYK, you'll notice a definite desaturation happening, and so you might not want to. I would say don't mess with the bits. There's no need to go higher than the 8. And we can start with the Y. For advanced options, I wouldn't worry about this either. It's pretty rare that you're going to be switching your color profiles unless you're a photographer. And square pixels is normal. If you go a little bit further down, and you can't see off of my screen here, there's a bunch of different formats, and these would be mostly specific to video use, because different countries use different sizes there. Okay, I think that's about it. Typically, all you're really worrying about is what size is it, what resolution is it, and make sure your color mode is set correctly, and then you're done. You can switch back and forth. This is not the only place that you can do this at. I'm going to go ahead and click Artboards. Oh, that's interesting. It's the Artboard situation that it doesn't like it. Okay, never noticed that. Well, we can make Artboards later too. So let's start here. So here's our blank document. And now we can do whatever we want with it. If at this point you want to switch anything out, you can do a lot of the things up here. Some of the things are going to be grayed out just because you don't have anything existing yet. It's just blank. So as you put more information and more content in here, your options will increase. All right, now one thing down here is another place where you can mess around with your color. And here up at the very top here where it says image mode, if I wanted to at this point switch it to RGB, I can do that. So if there's anything else, let me open up some of the basic ones. Over here, we'll get into these right away, but one thing that you'll need to figure out pretty quickly is what type of workspace you would like. Excuse me, I always work in Essentials, just to keep it as simple as possible when I'm doing tutorials. So Essentials, basically there's specific items here that people tend to use, and it also has to do with your toolbar over here. Toolbars, one thing you can do with it is either make it a 2-column or a 1-column. It might depend on the size of your screen as to what makes sense there. And let me just show you a couple of the other workspaces so you can see the differences. So 3D, if you're working in 3D, there's just certain things that you're going to want to be affecting more. And so now it doesn't mean that you're stuck with those. You can close these different windows out at will, but they'll bring them up specifically for, like here's a timeline. You don't see that with a normal document, but you can bring up timeline. So I won't go through all the spaces because we won't be utilizing them, but if you are working heavily in photography, that might be something you want to look at. You can always close some of these windows down. Typically, it's all those items that you can. I'm going to go ahead and go to Essentials just so we can see that again. And you can close some of these out. These little tiny arrows up at the top here, you can simply click them and close them out. You can also pull these, if you have especially if you have a bigger screen, you can pull these items away. And if you want to click them back in, you just push them and then they will accept the new ones. For most of the work that we do, we're going to need to be working with layers, which is down here. Oftentimes you'll have to work with color. And if if your screen's, I use a narrow view when I'm doing the tutorials, but that you've still got some space over here. Oops, most likely. So you don't need to worry if you can't see everything. You can always bring it up. So here's where the windows are. So if I don't want to see color, I just collapse it. If I, here you can see layers. Usually you'll have quite a few, so this one will probably be up the most. But these are all the different items that can be up. And there's some things that you'll want up once in a while. There's some things like layers that you pretty much will want all the time. But again, you can close these up. There's also under View, there's different ways to see your screen. And you can, I would say start paying attention to hotkeys once you start getting familiar with Photoshop. So zooming in and out, I do all the time with hotkeys. That symbol is Command on my Mac. It'll fit on screen. If you have zoomed, a lot out, while you can do the minus, you can also simply, like this one is, you can fit onto screen, so it'll show the whole thing again. And sometimes that's really helpful. There's print size. Print size here, this has to do with, you can see here, up here, I have my rulers on. Let me turn them off briefly. Here it might not make much sense, but if you look up here, you can see these are the different inch sizes. So this is 7, and then this is 5, so we got a 5 by 7. And this is at 24%, so if I go up to 100%, then you can see a little bit more clearly with the size. Let me just double check something here. I might have made it. Yeah, there we go. So here's the size again. So View and Window, you're going to be clicking through those quite often. Let's see, one that you'll probably want to use fairly often is the rulers, where you turn it on and off. You can see here it's Command R. It's a quick little simple hotkey. And you want those just to be able to sometimes figure out where you're at, to be able to, if you're doing something symmetrical, you want to lay some guides down. With the rulers on, you can make guides which are invisible. Well, they're visible to you, but they don't actually exist within the file image. They're called guides, and if you click and hold down with your pad or mouse, you can drag out and then make these guides wherever you want them. They vertical and horizontal, and they just help figure out your composition sometimes. There's also different couple other different ones to look at. There's different kinds of grids that you might want to consider. I don't particularly use grids, but I'll turn it on so you can see it. Over here under Preferences, you can go over here to General, which is fine, and then you can find it. But over here under Guides and Grids, you can modify what the grids and guides look like. You can also change their subdivisions. You can change the grid line. Are you working in pixels? Are you working with inches? And that way you'll see what we have right here. You can see it's listed at 1 inch and then wants a subdivision of 4. So that's these little lines that we see here. So these are movable and changeable, but not in a spot where you might think. Instead, they're under Preferences. And then you can just close them off. So unclick, and then they'll go away. All right, now the only last thing I can think of, let me just bring up a couple files so that you can see. And right here we have 2 side by side. You might have multiples, And if you want to see them all together on screen, that's going to be under Window. And you can arrange them differently. Right now, these are all available if you have up to 6 images open at a time. You can have more than that, but it'll just reduce them to tabs. But sometimes you want to see them all, but other times you want to be able to view both of them and or more of them. So this is a way to do that. Otherwise, you can just do consolidate to tabs, and then it'll show you only one at a time. And I think that's probably enough for the first basic round of opening up a new document.